But no, I've prided myself on working across the aisle and getting stuff done. And if you elect me as U.S. Senator, I think that's what you're electing me to do, not just to play partisan politics and make the rhetorical points, but to focus on solutions and results. That's what I've tried to talk about today, is that, that's our challenge as a country right now, I think, is to get away from some of the 30-second sound bites and some of the cable news back and forth, and instead to focus on, how do we really move the country forward, and to not look at things on a partisan basis, but look in terms of what's best for Ohio, where we've got a very tough economy right now, and our country. So thanks for the question.
Your speech easily could have been titled "Jobs, Jobs, Jobs." As a follower of Jim Rhodes, that was almost all of his speeches were jobs. Yeah. And I think absolutely the right timing. But in the long run, if you become our senator, we are in a cultural divide in this country. Mm-hmm. Timidity is not what we need now. You've got two opponents that are progressives and with very sharp elbows. How do you plan on defending a more timid approach than a very strong approach?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly, but this is going to be a tough campaign. The general election will have plenty of sharp elbows in it, and it's partly because Ohio is so important. You think about it in the 2012 context, Ohio may well decide who our next president is again. And I assume President Obama's political advisors are telling him, if you lose in 2010 in Ohio, your chances are less good in 2012 and you might not be reelected. If you win Ohio in 2012, it's a foregone conclusion you're probably reelected. So this is going to be a state where there'll be a lot of focus and there'll be a lot of ads. You will see ads being run about me that I hope you'll find unbelievable. You'll think, God, that nice guy from Cincinnati was here at the Cleveland City Club. I can't believe that he did that. But because they're going to be sharp elbows, and I'm prepared for it. It's not what I like about politics, but it's part of the process of getting elected and being able to help. It's also a really important race, and to your point about sharp elbows, because this seat could be the 60th vote, meaning cutting off debate and enacting legislation on all those issues I talked about. So for those of you who maybe have not been as engaged in politics before, you better be engaged this time. And maybe you disagree with what I talked about today, and you don't think that we should be stopping some of this legislation that I view is bad for jobs in Ohio. But regardless of which side you end up on that, this is a watershed election. There are now probably 57 or 58 or 59 votes for all those proposals we talked about. So increasing the energy costs, the health care legislation, of course, which is currently being debated, the card check legislation, the increase in taxes, more spending, is right on the cusp. And I think Democrats are going to work hard to try to find a reliable vote for the President and for Mrs. Pelosi and for Mr. Reid. And George Voinovich is there now. He's standing up to these proposals and policies. So it would be one more vote toward that 60th vote. So this is going to be a watershed election and an incredibly important election. And we're going to fight hard because it's important, not because we want to be engaged in the bare-knuckle world of politics, but because it's too important not to fight hard. And we're going to have the resources to do it too. And that's part of the challenge of running for office statewide, is being able to raise the funds to be able to defend your position, and more important for me, to be proactive and to be out there in places like Cleveland where I'm not as well known with what we stand for and who I am. And we're fortunate in that we're raising the resources we need to get that message out. Thank you.
Mr. Portman, you raised many issues that are facing Congress today.
Yes.
One issue you didn't mention, though, which is being discussed in Congress as we stand here right now, is the issue of abortion. Most Republicans in the United States Senate have felt that the women should not have a right to have an abortion and have passed laws which made it more difficult. If you were elected to the United States Senate, would you follow the Republican line on that? Or would you be a maverick, shall we say, and be someone who would support a woman's right to have an abortion?
Well, I don't know where maverick falls on that spectrum, but no, I'm not going to follow anybody's line. I'm just going to follow my own line, which is the line I've followed since I got elected 15 years ago, which is I've been pro-life. I do believe that this is a tough issue where people are going to have honest disagreements. You rightly said, I didn't talk about it in my remarks because my focus is on jobs and the economy. But my voting record has been consistent, and it would be consistent going forward on that issue, which is that I believe that the pro-life position is the appropriate position, particularly with regard to federal funding, and that's where it comes up in Congress, as you know, is whether federal funds should be used for abortion. And I believe that would be wrong. And that will come up again in the next several weeks here as the health care bill works its way through the Senate. If it passes the Senate, it'll be a huge point of debate back in the House. The question? Yes, sir.
Mr. Portman, welcome back to Cleveland.
Thank you.
One of the issues I've got a concern about, and you don't have control over it maybe right now, but you know, it appears that the Congress is going to take a 2% pay increase at a time when the country is suffering, every household is feeling the pain of the economic downturn. And in addition, it looks like they're going to they've already passed the COLA increase for Social Security. How can Congress be so separate and distant from what's going on in the United States?
Yeah. I think actually based on the inflation and the market basket they use in Social Security, that COLA was not granted in Social Security. And yet Congress seems intent on passing its own COLA, which I think is wrong. Look, these are tough times, and as I said earlier, if we don't act and act quickly, they're going to get tougher. I'd like to think that we're on a trajectory for recovery and that everything's going to be fine, but as I talk to smart people around Ohio and listen to people who have looked at these economic ups and downs over the years, because every 10 years we do tend to go through a recession, there's a lot of nervousness. And this is not a time for Congress to be paying itself more or for Congress to be coming up with new spending programs that requires 50 cents on the dollar to be borrowed. This is a time for us to streamline government, make it work more efficiently, have it be more responsive, and begin to do things that help spur, again, private sector growth, starting with not having this panoply of potential proposals that make it so difficult for an investor, an entrepreneur, a risk taker to get out there and create that job and opportunity, and then actually putting in place pro-growth, pro-jobs policies. We better do it and do it quickly. And by the way, while the United States is languishing in things like trade, other countries are engaged. We have no negotiations going on in trade because we can't even move the current trade opening agreements that we have. Meanwhile, the Europeans are engaged in dozens of trade agreements to take away our market share. While we languish and do not make our own economy more competitive, and particularly our manufacturing more competitive, other countries are moving forward with advances, as I said, in retraining in science and technology. We better move, and we better move quickly, and we can. And look, you know, we have the strongest economy on the face of the earth. Market capitalism works. Democratic capitalism works. We've got an economy and a tradition and a history that is still the envy of the world. People want to be us. When I was in the job of trade representative, I had the honor of going around the world and representing our great country. And most of the countries I was negotiating with for trade opening agreements were either socialist countries or formerly socialist countries that are now becoming emerging economies. Countries like Brazil or South Africa, countries like China or India or Malaysia or Indonesia or Egypt. They all want to be us. And sometimes in public, they weren't always complimentary of the United States because we're the 800-pound gorilla, the big developed country. But in private, they all said the same thing, which is, how do you do it? How do you create these market capitalist systems where you have transparency, you don't have corruption, where you have the ability to increase people's prosperity, where you've created the greatest middle class on the face of the earth? They want to be us. Isn't it ironic at a time when all these emerging economies want to be us, that we seem to want to be what they're coming from, which is higher taxes, higher regulations, and an economy that stifles innovation and entrepreneurship. That really is the challenge of our time, I think. Thank you all very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we've been listening to a Friday forum featuring candidate for the U.S. Senate, Rob Portman. Thank you very much, Mr. Portman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.